Our next panel is shifting the market at scale, and this is going to look at overcoming the pain points in digital adoption.
Today we have with us a great panel with a diverse background to discuss and a follow-on on the previous panel, the trends in digitization, but also how does this apply to supply chain. Our previous panel discussed the interoperability between players and the need for a discussion that is broader than one organization, but across the value chain. Now, I want to throw the ball to you, panelists, to start with a definition and understanding on how the supply chain can evolve into maturity. What does it mean? What's the status today? So I'll start with you, Simon, maybe, and understanding the state of the situation.
Thank you for the question. So I think it's quite fragmented depending on which projects and which industries you look at. I think Menno, on the previous presentation, I was really inspired by some of their vision. If you look at flowing everything from the top down into all of the different parts of the supply chain, that for me was quite an important aspect of changing things. I think in many aspects of projects, whether it's the mandate from a legal perspective or whether it's based on the contract, I think there are a lot of challenges and silos that prevent doing people things in the way that we think they should be done in an idealistic world. And I think that NEOM in particular, as an example, sounds like a very good project here where they're trying to change that. So for me, I think that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Simon. And Shawki, specifically, Nesma had a lot of adventures in discovering the supply chain maturity with clear examples. So how does it showcase for you?
So first of all, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to represent Nesma and this great panel discussion with great peers. First of all, as an EPC contractor, you know, we rely heavily on the supply chain in our success in every aspect of our delivery. So it was really important for us to truly understand how we can work together with the supply chain in finding the best ways to improving the entire ecosystem, and understanding how we can improve some of the current issues that were ongoing, especially since you know, we discussed a lot earlier, there's going to be a lot more projects coming up, so the capacity is going to increase. So it's important for us to be able to find the right ways to be able to scale all the current operations that are currently there. So for us, what we try to do is find the right data strategy. Okay, and the most important thing was to be able to streamline the entire process. So we work together with our you know, subcontractors and vendors and suppliers, and we try to understand what are their pain points and how can we properly structure the inputs and outputs that are required in order to create an environment that leads to better collaboration. And that's really how we saw we could build the right platform and the right environment for success. So what we did is we built actually 2 solutions, you know, internally, and we're looking forward to developing them further with our different business partners, as we like to call them.
Thanks, Shawki. I'll pick it up with Mohamed, because you were mentioning specifically on data strategy focus, but also many pain points. So when you look at the supply chain maturity, Mohamed, and you're dealing with big holdings, so how do you see those pain points, and what are the key pillars to move forward?
First of all, thank you all. Thank you for the organizers and for the audience for coming here and for the very interesting panel in the beginning. I want to say something before we jump to the supply chain. And the buzzword digital transformation, supply chain, is not only for the mega projects. This is the first thing we need to think. It's not only mega or giga. We want also all of the small companies and medium companies to be on board with us, because definitely there's a lot of things can be done And it's not only in the top layer of trillion projects which is happening in Saudi Arabia, which is unprecedented actually, and we are lucky to be here. This is the first thing I want to score. We want everybody on this room to think, yes, digital transformation is a must, and we need to go forward with it. How to go forward? I believe it's a strategy, as exactly Shawki just mentioned. And the strategy started on the top. Strategy started with the CEO, the board of directors, and the executives and top managers. We need to think strategy, how to transform our companies, and how to start to deliver. This is a question we need to ask ourselves now if we want to continue in the business. This is a fact, and we need to deal with it immediately. The second thing I want to start to say that working construction, which is a very unfriendly for digital to be digitized. Actually, McKinsey was comparing it to farming a few years back. It's a true story. So we need to start from this, where we are, and what is our plan to move forward. Back to the question, to answer the supply chain quick. We in Shomoul Holding, we are building a couple of mega projects here, actually. The biggest from mixed-use developments from a private sector at the moment. I'll leave PIF projects aside because this is unprecedented size. So we're thinking supply chain. For example, we have Nesma, our partners in our Avenues Riyadh project. And one of our first thinking in our supply chain, we need to push more prefab elements in our job. So we introduced precast, we introduced AirDeck, we introduced hollow cores, despite the challenge, because we're building a mold, a biggest mold, we have 1,500, 1,600 retails, and you expect a lot of changes in these retails. And definitely cast in place or cast in situ is a bit preferred here, but we take the challenge and we moved with a precast, which means our BIM model have to be ready before we start to manufacture in the factories. We have to have all of the design almost complete to avoid any abortive work or hollow core or coring on site. All of us know that the precast and hollow core is a bit challenging when it comes to coring on site. So you have to first challenge yourself at the design stage. This is my first. Where is the elements I'm going to move with the prefab, and then improving the supply chain accordingly. This is my first intake on that.
Thank you. It sets the scene clearly. Actually, just to recap, Zulema, we were just seeing how the previous panel was harnessing into digital transformation across the board, specifically for the supply chain. Highlights on data, on strategy, but also on modernization. So my question to you, what are the pain points and what does it mean to modernize the digital supply chain?
I'm so sorry for being late. I was with a client, you know how it is. I think everyone knows that in the construction, we suffer for low performance. You were talking about McKinsey comparing to farming. I think it's a little bit extreme. I think we are moving forward, and we have excellent EPC contractors actually moving forward. But anyway, we know that we suffer low performance, poor teamwork, regulation, we are getting there, inadequate compliance, and insufficient information. Information is key. Information is the driver for any organization as well as people. So for me, zooming out and looking at the construction industry from a holistic point of view, these problems are originated from the fragmented nature of the construction industry. I don't know if you have talked about fragmentation, but I will talk a lot. The fragmentation can happen in 3 levels, as we know: vertical, horizontal, and longitudinal. So vertical meaning that you have the design, the construction, operations, so different stakeholders looking at competing in values and interest. Then you have the horizontal, different subcontractors, different trades looking at their own interests and priorities. And this is the problem. We need to start thinking that we are rowing into the same direction. It's not our own self-interest, it's the project's interest. And then you have the longitudinal, I call, where you have like different projects in the pipeline. So each project is treated as one of a kind, in a sense. So the construction team, I call it as a construction clan. Once the project finishes, we disappear, in a sense, you know, off you go, and then probably I'll see you again in 3 years' time. So doesn't foster innovation, and that is something that we need to start looking at. The second pain point, I will say, is IT interoperability. What do I mean by that is because we are fragmented, and actually the nature of this fragmentation can be seen in our IT isolated solutions. So we implement solutions for specific needs, not looking at the holistic view of the whole project. And this is kind of a call for the solution providers. Maybe you, I'm looking at you, but we need to start looking at everything in the project, not a specific pain point that we are suffering in a specific project. So those are...
Thanks for this. Go ahead, Mohamed.
I want to add one point here. I believe strongly our pain point is not on IT.
Interoperability. Interoperability, which we are talking, for me, the whole digitalization of the supply chain is creating this common data environment for everyone to have transparency, all the stakeholders and processes into a common data environment, to have the transparency and to increase
trust. It starts in the top. The minute we have a buy-in from the top, it will cascade down and we will solve all problems in this domain. It's never an ICT problem or technology.
Okay.
In my opinion, because really it's a key point. We need the executive sitting here, the C-level, to understand you are the driving force for this in your companies. One something some companies did, they created a shadow board, board of directors, which from young, tech, savvy guys to help the chairmen and the board of directors to come to a reliable or a vision for the digital transformation. So maybe it's a good trick to do that.
So I want to jump in here just to highlight that. So the first part here, we discuss and need to agree on what are our pain points before we move to the solutions, right? And I heard quite interesting pain points on when and how fast we move to modernization, what's our data clearance, data information available, how it is being used, but also topics around how making sure that all players are interoperable and able to work together towards a solution, because we're talking about supply chain modernization and bringing it to maturity. And it will always be as mature as the lowest mature elements in the supply chain. Now, shifting gears, and I look at you, Simon, because I saw you ready to jump in with some solutions. What exists out there? What's there? Let's forget about the problems. Let's look at the solutions. Independently of the challenges, we'll get into implementation problems later on. What exists out there? What are the solutions?
For me, I think that's part of the problem. You're jumping ahead to the solutions before you've looked at the problems. And I think too many organizations rush into those types of decisions. Coming from a software vendor, it's quite difficult for me to say that. But in a lot of cases, they'll have a siloed implementation in one area with closed data, and the rest of the supply chain can't get access easily to that. And for me, I think those are some of the biggest problems that we need to solve and I think you were alluding to part of this, is you need to be able to give access to data to the people who need it, and not lock it in a box which one software vendor controls. So I think you can't look at it in isolation in terms of what exists. I think all the technology that we need to have a completely connected construction project environment, it all exists already, whether it's been authored by a software company or whether it's some technology that you can build yourself. Everything is there, all the building blocks are there. I think it's just, and again, sorry to pick on you, Mano, defining those top 50 use cases I think for me, that's the most important starting point. Define all of your use cases first before you start to engage too much in technical technology decisions, because you're going to end up hamstringing yourself.
So open source data and the ability to have a solution based on reality that is tackling what it requires. Now, how did you see it happening on the ground at Nesma with practical use cases? And how did you engage those that are not Nesma? So supply chain maturity, it's about you and the others around you.
First of all, I just wanted to comment on Zulema's point. I couldn't agree more. I think one of the main issues that we have, and that's why we don't have, an easy solution, is the fact that the industry is so fragmented. So you have contractors working in one way, you have architects and designers working in another, and you have the suppliers and subcontractors working in a different way. So part of the issue behind not having that clear data interoperability is because we don't have a unified strategy, mainly because of the fragmentation in the industry that we have. And another issue that we're starting to see now, and I'm not picking on software providers, is that even the solutions are not creating an environment that's breaking those silos. So each solution is providing you state-of-the-art output in something specific. However, yes, we can argue we have APIs and we can link them all together, but it's not giving us a straightforward solution that's end-to-end. And I think that's part of the problem, and I think that's what environments like these should help us as industry leaders be able to bridge that gap and create something that helps unify the industry there. But what we did, and I'll cut it short, is we developed let's say, for example, our vendor management portal, in which we try to break that fragmentation or those silos internally within the company. And so whenever we needed to evaluate a certain potential supplier or subcontractor, we made sure that the function that's experienced to evaluate that vendor or subcontractor provided their input and their evaluation on the matter. So we tried to break those silos by creating an end-to-end cycle that creates a lot of collaboration from within, and that also cascaded to our supply chain. So you asked me, how did we do to bring in that maturity? So at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you're bridging the gap between the people, the processes, and the products. But the most important factor there is the people. So we actually discussed, Zulema and myself yesterday with our team, a lot about change management. And change management plays a pivotal role in us being able to have a successful digitalization or digital transformation. So raising awareness, creating workshops in which we show maybe the new way of working, and really just improving the awareness, honestly, creating the right environment for people to ask the right questions and showing them new ways and different ways. And part of that was opening invitations to other subcontractors and part of our business partners to come in to such events as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to say that I'm truly impressed with what Nesma is doing, because they are tackling the main, for me, the fundamental, which is before we all go nuts and start implementing technology, let's look at our supply chain. Is it already integrated physically? Are we actually talking to each other? You need to look at that first, and you need to spend quality time on analyzing what you currently have. And that's what they did. And they did amazingly for the past 2 years, because they focus on the people and on the current state of the organization before, again, drawing the to-be and jumping in the to-be. Change management is key. People, I always say this to my clients, people are the key driver for the organization. Without people, you can implement whatever you want, that you are not going to move forward. So just to finalize on here, the fragmentation stops when you put everyone together and everyone is aware of where are we heading towards to, and they understand what is in it for them. And just wanted to.
Yeah. So I'll throw a provocative message here, and then we can deep dive on some pillars. So basically, if I summarize, we have designers, developer, contractors, and end user managing the sites. Then at the same time, you have software engineers who are throwing a clutter of digitalization in the middle. And as Mohamed mentioned before, now comes the modern methods of construction with factories getting in the middle of the value chain, trying to squeeze in. And all that with a variety of maturity, with the designers using BIM as if it was the utmost solution for everyday's challenges, and the contractors barely using the first technology. So with such diverse people, I want to discuss the first pillar. There are many. There's a regulation, data, but you touched on a very core element. How do we make the upskilling relevant?
Touching on the issue of fragmentation and the fact that we work in silos, this is going to be one of the key challenges that we need to address in order to be able to upscale any of what we're doing. I'm just going to give a quick analogy before I come back to the potential answer, because I don't think anyone has the answer right now. We may have just a few ideas that we can discuss. Take, for example, if we're talking about comparing the construction industry to other industries where they've already, made, I would say, much further journeys in terms of implementing technology, potentially smart solutions, so on and so forth. Like, for example, the automotive, the aerospace, and so on. If I take the automotive as an example, and we take one of the, say, car manufacturers, say Mercedes-Benz, just for the sake of argument. What is an automotive manufacturer? They are the developer, they are the designers, they are the engineers, they are the main contractors, and effectively they control the supply chain. They all use pretty much the same, they work in a virtual environment, so they do coordination and integration. This is very important, right? What we do in the building construction industry, for the most part, it's really just coordination. We put stuff next to one another. Here's the structure, here's the MEP, here's the facade, here's this, here's that. But there isn't really proper integration. We have different consultants working to different logics. They have different interests, as it already been mentioned. And then where do facility managers, for example, come along? We always engage with the managers at the very end, right, of any project stage, normally during construction or even during handover. I rarely see, for example, facility managers being involved at early feasibility stages or design stages, even though if you take the whole life cycle of any cost of funding, 20, maybe a maximum 30% of it is capital cost, but then 70 to 80% is actually operational cost. Yet we only involve facility managers who are responsible for that at the very latest stages. Back to the analogy. For example, a certain idea is created within the environment, right, of, say, an automotive manufacturer. They do feasibility studies, and then they dedicate a large portion of their budget to R&D. So within the program of any new car, for example, to be done, there's this period where it's called research and development. And this research and development is not just digital simulation. It also involves a lot of physical simulation, a lot of testing with real people, for example, right, and so on. And then when this car is put in the market, they also retain the data. So they know, for example, the performance of the car, they have the reviews of people, they basically know how to retain data. And then this data is used again in order to develop the next generation, right, of their vehicles. Now, how does this compare to what we're talking about? If we are in an environment where is the original idea coming from? Nobody knows. How is this then going to be channeled all the way down, the architect, the engineer, main contractors, and so on? Nobody really knows. So we're just allowing it to happen organically. There's a lot of trial and errors. There's a lot of, I would say, losses that, we're bound to make because the whole industry is really not organized in a way where things are coming from the top and then channeling all the way down. For example, now in Britain, they have something called Digital Britain. So it's basically like a framework, a set of guidelines, which in time turn into, I would say, codes and legislations and so on that people have to follow in order to have a proper smart infrastructure, right, across the board. We're talking from feasibility stage all the way down to operation, right, which includes design, contracting, and so on. So if we're going to, if the potential answer, I would say from my side, to how can you upscale this, is we have to try, we're not going to be able to change the entire business model of the construction industry, but it would be interesting to see if one of those developers, one of those investors out there are willing to turn into a business, to have a business model similar to the automotive, for example, or aerospace organizations, where they're going to say, okay, I'm the developer now, but at the same time, I'm going to have an in-house team doing the feasibility study, the architecture, the engineering, and I'm going to take care of the main contractor, and I'm just then going to rely on the supply chain. But then when you're in control of all of that, then you have very, very clear guidelines for the supply chain. These guys are no longer have to scratch their head and figure out how they're going to address these different parties, because now it's under one responsibility. And there's no more what we call finger pointing, because you know how it is in the building construction industry. Whenever something goes wrong, right, you point out at the feasibility, for example, consultant, oh, he didn't do the feasibility study correctly. If the design goes to the engineering, oh, architect did not do their job correctly.
Thank you.
And then it goes to contracting, or the engineers did not do their job correctly, if you see what I mean. So really, I think the solution is having a developer, encouraging either governmental organizations or investors or current developers to try to change their business model and become more closer to the automotive and the aerospace.
Thanks, Abdelmajid, much appreciated. And I would like to be cautious of time also to allow for some questions. So one last spin is role of government, role of regulator. Who is going to move this supply chain at the same speed? Is it going to be the contractors? Is it going to be the developer, the designer, the software engineers with cluttered software ideas? Or what's the role of government? What do you expect of the policymakers to incentivize to move? Just a closing word so we can let some questions in. Please go ahead.
Mohamed. Yeah, I'll pick that. Of course, the regulators have there is a lot of focus on regulators here to push this industry. For example, when we're thinking BIM 10 years back, not every contractor, not every developer, not every designer was ready to jump with BIM. Now it started to be the norm, and we believe a mandate has to be in Saudi about it, at least in a specific range of the projects. Maybe we can classify it 35 floors, high-rise towers and above. All of this has to be followed, moving with BIM. Developers also, especially big ones, have a big important role to stop this fragmentation we're talking about. Because the minute you move the design industry, your mega project design, all over is BIM. You have like 20 consultants working with you and delivering a BIM, and then you're tendering to the market, to the big contractors, and also the subcontractors afterwards. A BIM federated models coordinated to level of details to 300, and then you're requesting them, okay, I want to use this model for the operation and maintenance model. I want to utilize this till the end of my life cycle project.
So enforcing and penalizing, ensuring that it happens. And anything around incentivization. So there is a penalty in enforcing, or there is also a reward element. So anything, please, Simon.
So building on top of your question there, that's quite a technical answer, but I think you also need to look at the contractual way that people engage with each other, and I think government can mandate more of a collaborative type of engagement from a contracting perspective. Technically, I think, again, whatever we need to do can be done, but it's changing the way that you have an employer, a contractor, subcontractors, and they don't share anything across those silos, essentially, building on your fragmentation issue there. So I think if you can change the way that contracts are signed between the different partners, I think that would make a huge difference.
Fantastic. Words of finish, 20 seconds each.
I just think it's a unified approach. I think the SCA is doing a fantastic job right now on their platforms, and I think combining that with other contractors, other members of the supply chain, I think we can come a long way and really be able to incentivize, but also enforce, whether it's contractually or through the platforms.
I want to add one thing, is actually the Saudi PIF specifically is doing a great job with enforcing these mega projects with the highest standard, whether even in housing like Roshan or this NEOM or whatever.
I will enforce time. 20 seconds.
No, 20 seconds, sorry. I wanted to give an example, which I think is going to be useful for the audience. So we engage with, well, the Canadian government engaged with us because they saw that even though they were mandating BIM in Canada, the contractors were like, yeah, sure, we are doing it, but actually how mature you are, how much advantage are you taking from it, from the technology? So they engage us to assess the level of maturity of these contractors and then help them. So this is the incentive. The government is helping you to mature in the journey. And I think that is key. And I think it needs to come from the top. And I know that I'm over 20 seconds, so stop looking at me.
Excellent. So monitoring data, being able to see where we stand and have a route. I open the floor for questions. Apologies, we exhausted time also at the same time. Questions? Microphones around?
A question maybe to all the panelists here. If we look internally at companies, and I agree with Mohamed when he said it should start from a strategy point of view, not from the ICT. If we look at usually the equation between capabilities and ambition, so we all in this arena, we have the ambition to move into the digital space and do digital transformation. And what about capabilities? Are we looking at that? Do we consider changes in the organization? Do we consider changes in the knowledge management? Do we consider changes in the way that we innovate things? And if we do, to what level are we in this? Thank you.
Capabilities and upskill. Who wants to take it? One of you. Mohamed?
Okay, I believe also it cascaded down from a strategy. We're talking about upskilling, and I believe it's, again, HR job. When we hire people, we have to have a plan how to upskill them in a 1 year time to be digitally fit to match our company strategy. This is one thing. Also, I believe it's picking, as Simon was saying, it's very difficult to pick a winners in the technology. But there will always, we have to be followers or to have to be leaders. Sometimes you have to pick your choice and move forward, and you accept you may have to come back and to reverse that. Otherwise, you will always be a laggard. So sometimes you have to take a reasonable risk when you implement the technology.
Thank you, Menon. And I just want to reflect this same question to the previous panel, as Menon de Jongs was mentioning that in NEOM they built an actual academy to make it happen in some places, so through curriculums and career path, which helps people to see the industry as attractive, but also grow through and make the survivability of the industry. Any other questions around here? There is a question down there.
Thank you very much. Actually, my question is, a lot of technology companies or digital companies now for these technologies in different levels of maturity. So we see every company have different when they are producing their tools. So for me as a master developer or something like this, what is your advice how to choose the best company for my case? Because it's always different levels of maturity, prices, a lot of things. So how you see things?
I will give the question to people. First, Abdul Majid, if you have the mic on, and then I think you were mentioning something around maturity. Abdul Majid?
Yes. How to choose, sorry if I understood the question correctly, how to choose the right company to consult you on upscaling? Was that the question?
So the question from the audience was around the maturity and how to choose which companies to work with, if I translated correctly.
Okay. Really tough question. I would say, generally speaking, really, you need to look at partners who are willing to look at the bigger picture holistically. Unfortunately, there are many consultants out there, and this is not an accusation, it's just what it is, that they are either specialized in certain technologies or specialized in certain surfaces, and they're only really looking at how they can implement that with having the capacity to look at the bigger picture. So I think your best chance is to have a strategic consultant who's capable at looking at the bigger picture, looking at exactly what is it that you want to do. And then they will be able to help you to select the right consultants to work with. There's not going to be one consultant to be able to do everything, right? It's going to be a collaborative kind of integrated process. So really you need to start with that strategic consultant, not a technology advisor, for example, or a software provider or anything like that, right? A strategic consultant capable of looking at the holistic system, looking at things in a holistic way, and then be able to select with you the right people. But then with that, as I was saying before, there really has to be an allowance, both in terms of time and in terms of budget, for what we call research and development. And that includes physical testing. Unfortunately, the vast majority of testing that we see is done digitally or in a virtual world. And it's not being done enough involving actual human beings and be able to see psychologically, physically, how these people react to these new solutions. And that would be really my best guess in terms of how to select the right consultant.
Thank you, Abdelmajid. Thank you, the panelists. I have to excuse the timing, so I'll excuse also the panelists. Thank you very much for a very rich conversation, and clear the solution is in upskilling, regulation, data, and working together to make the supply chain more mature. Thank you very much.
Thank you.